July 1943, San Pietro, Sicily. The young Italian woman clutched her thin blanket in the darkness, listening to the heavy footfalls of American soldiers outside the makeshift holding area. Adelina Rossi, 23, had served the Italian 54th Infantry Division for 18 months as part of the Servizio Ausiliario Femminile, the women's auxiliary service. She had been captured 3 days earlier when American forces overran defensive positions outside Palermo. Now she waited for what fascist propaganda had assured her would happen. The American soldiers would come for the women during the night. "They told us Americans treated women as commodities," she later recalled in a 1972 interview. "We expected to be used as comfort women, just as our own officers had used local women in occupied territories." Across Sicily that summer, 1,811 Italian women in auxiliary military service fell into American hands during Operation Husky, the Allied invasion that began Italy's collapse. These women had served in various capacities: 743 as administrative staff, 529 as field hospital assistants, 418 as communications specialists, and 121 in what Italian military documents euphemistically called morale services, women who had worked in military-controlled brothels servicing Italian officers. The fascist propaganda machine had prepared these women for capture with horrifying specificity. American soldiers, they were told, were sexually uncontrolled, prone to violence, and considered Italian women legitimate spoils of war. Military instruction manuals discovered later revealed female auxiliaries were taught that capture would mean automatic conscription into makeshift brothels for American troops. Most disturbingly, the women had been shown forged photographs purporting to show captured Libyan and Ethiopian women being processed into American comfort stations during earlier campaigns in North Africa. These images, later proven to be staged in Rome film studios, showed dark-eyed women standing in lines, being examined by leering American officers. Captain Eleanor Peterson of the newly formed Women's Army Corps, assigned to prisoner processing in Sicily, documented the extreme fear among female Italian prisoners. "They physically resist separation from male prisoners," she wrote in her July 17th report. "They believe remaining with Italian men provides some protection against what they've been told to expect from our troops." American military protocol, however, operated under strict regulations regarding female prisoners. War Department Directive 19J, issued in May 1943, established comprehensive guidelines. Separate sleeping quarters, with minimum 40 square feet per prisoner, mandatory female American personnel as primary contacts, and designated private hygiene facilities. Most significantly, male American personnel were prohibited from entering female prisoner quarters without female American military personnel present. The first night after capture presented the initial contradiction to everything these women had been taught. At the temporary holding facility in San Pietro, Adelina and 27 other women were placed in a former schoolhouse with intact windows, clean blankets, and, most shockingly, a lock on the inside of their door. Outside, 2 American WACS stood guard, not to prevent escape, but to ensure no unauthorized personnel entered. The American women took rotating shifts, sleeping on cots in the hallway outside the Italian women's room. As darkness fell, no one came for them. The American women guards simply nodded goodnight and settled onto their cots, visible through the doorway's small window. "We didn't sleep that first night," Adelina later testified. "We waited in terror for the door to open, for the Americans to show their true intentions. But morning came, and the door remained closed. We had locked it ourselves." This first night initiated a fundamental reconsideration that would ultimately demolish years of fascist indoctrination. The women who had expected to become comfort girls for American troops instead encountered something incomprehensible: female guards who slept outside their door, protecting them from the very violation they had been told was inevitable. July 24, 1943. Processing Center Delta, Licata, Sicily. The female prisoners stood in single file as American WAC Sergeant Ruth Hildebrand distributed fresh clothing packets. Each woman received identical items: 2 cotton dresses in olive drab, 3 sets of undergarments, toiletries, and most surprisingly, feminine hygiene products wrapped discreetly in brown paper. The 76 Italian women processed that day moved through stations where American female personnel recorded their information, administered basic medical examinations, and assigned temporary quarters. We expected to be stripped, examined like livestock, and distributed to American units, former auxiliary Sofia Lombardi documented in her 1957 memoir. Instead, they gave us privacy screens during medical checks and female doctors when available. The American women wore the same uniforms as male soldiers, carried sidearms, and spoke to us with direct authority. This contradiction to everything we had been taught began our re-education. American military regulations regarding female prisoners derived directly from the 1929 Geneva Convention provisions, specifically Article 3, which mandated prisoners of war are entitled to respect for their persons and honor. Women shall be treated with all consideration due to their sex. Unlike German forces who systematically violated these provisions, American military leadership implemented comprehensive protocols for female prisoner management. War Department Field Manual, FM 19-10, Military Police Operations, dedicated 27 pages to female prisoner handling. These regulations specified physical standards: minimum 65 square feet of living space per prisoner, partitioned toilet and shower facilities with privacy screens, and female-specific medical services. The manual explicitly prohibited male guards from entering female quarters without female military personnel present, and required at least one WAC officer assigned to every facility holding women. Most remarkably, the regulations mandated that female prisoners be housed in facilities of equal or superior quality to those housing American female personnel. This often resulted in American WACs living in more primitive conditions than their Italian prisoners, a fact that astonished the captives. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Halloran, WAC Battalion Commander for the Sicily region, documented the psychological impact. Female prisoners initially refused to believe our standard protocols, assuming special treatment is temporary deception. They watch our women sleeping in adjacent quarters, using identical facilities, eating the same rations. This visible evidence accomplishes what no propaganda could achieve. At Processing Center Delta, the sleeping arrangements directly contradicted Italian expectations. Female prisoners occupied a former government building with intact windows, functioning plumbing, and actual beds with mattresses. Adjacent rooms housed WAC personnel in nearly identical conditions, separated only by a hallway where a desk was staffed continuously by an American woman in uniform. Vatican observer Monsignor Giuseppe Donati, permitted to visit female prisoner facilities by American authorities, reported, "The women's quarters meet all reasonable standards of modesty and privacy. Most notably, American female soldiers sleep in the same building, under the same conditions, demonstrating a level of equality between captors and captives unprecedented in modern warfare." The most profound revelation came from observed interactions between American military men and women. Captain Antonio Baldini, an Italian medical officer also in American custody, noted in his journal, "Italian women prisoners witness American officers saluting female officers, taking orders from women sergeants, treating women as professional colleagues rather than objects. This visible contradiction to fascist gender doctrine causes more ideological damage than any defeat on the battlefield." This sleeping arrangement, American women in adjacent rooms, American men prohibited from entering without female escorts, systematically dismantled years of propaganda. Military records document that initial terror typically transformed into confusion by the third day, as Italian women realized the violations they feared would not materialize. As preparations began for transport to mainland facilities, these women confronted an uncomfortable truth. The Americans they had been taught to fear instead slept beside them as guardians, not predators. August 1943. USS West Point, North Atlantic. The converted luxury liner pitched gently in moderate seas as it carried 273 Italian female prisoners westward toward America. On Deck C, converted entirely to women's quarters, the Italian prisoners occupied cabins designed for civilian passengers. Each cabin held 4 women in bunk beds with clean linens changed weekly. The corridors outside contained wash stations with hot running water, a luxury many Italian women had rarely experienced even before the war. First Lieutenant Maria Rossi of the American WAC Corps supervised the women's section, her cabin positioned at the entrance to the secured area. She slept exactly 8 feet from the nearest prisoner cabin, close enough to respond to emergencies but maintaining appropriate separation. Her 12 female staff rotated shifts, ensuring female American personnel remained visible at all times. We learned the Americans followed strict rules about women, former prisoner Gianna Marino told researchers in 1952. On the ship, they gave us private showers with curtains. They assigned us cabins with doors that locked from inside. Female American soldiers slept in the same corridor, using identical facilities. This arrangement made no sense according to what we had been taught. The transport ships carrying female prisoners maintained comprehensive documentation. Naval records show USS West Point transported 3 groups of female Italian prisoners during August-September 1943, totaling 812 women. The ship's manifest listed specific provisions for female prisoners: 1.5 pounds of soap per woman weekly, standardized clothing including seasonal outerwear, and medical supplies including feminine hygiene products. Most remarkably, ship records documented that female prisoners received identical food rations as crew members, approximately 3,200 calories daily, including fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and occasional ice cream when freezer space permitted. This abundance contrasted sharply with civilian conditions in Italy, where food rationing had reduced daily consumption to approximately 1,100 calories by summer 1943. During the 14-day Atlantic crossing, Italian women observed American female military personnel moving freely throughout restricted areas of the ship, interacting professionally with male counterparts, and exercising authority over male subordinates. This visible evidence of American gender relations directly contradicted fascist propaganda about American women's supposedly subservient status. "We watched American women officers giving orders to men," recalled former prisoner Elena Bianchi. "We saw men standing at attention when women officers entered rooms." This respect between men and women contradicted everything Mussolini's government had taught us about American society. Upon arrival at Newport News, Virginia, female prisoners transferred to segregated train cars for transport to permanent camps. Camp Croft in South Carolina and Camp Shanks in New York established dedicated women's sections with comprehensive facilities. The standard layout included barracks housing 40 women, with 3-foot partitions between beds providing modest privacy. Adjacent buildings housed WAC personnel, assigned to prisoner supervision. The physical proximity between American female guards and Italian female prisoners created the conditions for fundamental re-evaluation. At Camp Croft, WAC personnel occupied identical barracks exactly 50 yards from prisoner quarters. The women shared the same basic facilities: similar showers, laundry equipment, and outdoor recreation areas, though used at different scheduled times. This sleeping arrangement, American women in nearly identical conditions just yards away, created profound psychological impact. Military intelligence reports noted prisoner conversations expressing initial disbelief, followed by reluctant recognition that their treatment contradicted everything they had expected. Lieutenant Helen Markham, WAC supervisor at Camp Croft, documented this transformation. Female prisoners initially remained clustered together, expecting assault. Within approximately 14 days, observing our normal routines, they begin adapting to reality rather than propaganda. By 1 month, most acknowledge that Americans are maintaining unexpected standards regarding women, even enemy women. The Italian women who had expected to serve as comfort girls instead found themselves guarded by American women who slept nearby, demonstrating through proximity and practice that American military policy explicitly protected rather than exploited female prisoners. September 1943. Camp Croft, South Carolina. Captain Shirley Adams walked the perimeter of the women's compound at 0600 hours, her WAC uniform pressed to regulation standards despite the humidity already building in the early morning air. The 26-year-old officer commanded a detachment of 47 American women responsible for 212 Italian female prisoners. Behind her, in identical barrack structures, American and Italian women prepared for morning roll call, their routines mirroring each other across the carefully maintained 50-yard neutral zone. The Women's Army Corps, established formally on July 1, 1943, represented a revolutionary development in American military structure. By September 1943, 27,728 American women served in uniform, including 1,743 officers. These women filled non-combat roles in administration, communications, medical services, and intelligence, freeing male personnel for combat deployment. Most significantly for the Italian prisoners, WAC personnel handled all primary supervision of female prisoners of war, implementing protocols that maintained both security and dignity. We couldn't comprehend their position at first, former prisoner Lucia Esposito recalled in a 1957 interview. These American women wore actual military uniforms, carried sidearms sometimes, and gave orders to men. Their sleeping quarters looked exactly like ours. They ate the same food, used the same shower facilities at different times. They were soldiers who happened to be women, not women serving men. This contradicted everything fascist education had taught us. The physical infrastructure at facilities housing female prisoners revealed American priorities. Camp Croft's women's section included barracks with standard-issue metal beds, clean linens changed weekly, and footlockers for personal items. The adjacent building housed American WAC personnel in nearly identical conditions, with only slightly more personal space, 64 square feet per person, versus 50 for prisoners, and minimal additional amenities. Both groups used similar bathroom facilities with flush toilets, hot showers, and privacy partitions. Most revealing was the mess hall arrangement. Unlike male prisoner compounds where Americans and prisoners ate separately, the women's facilities often operated a single dining facility with staggered schedules. Italian women observed American female personnel eating identical meals, approximately 3,200 calories daily, including fresh vegetables, meat, dairy, and occasional desserts. This equality in provisions directly contradicted fascist propaganda about American scarcity and inequity. Medical services particularly impressed Italian women prisoners. Camp medical records document that all female prisoners received comprehensive examinations upon arrival, administered by female medical personnel when possible. Standard women's healthcare continued throughout internment, with regular screenings, dental care, and access to female-specific medical services. The Americans assigned a female doctor to our compound, noted former prisoner Sophia Romano. She examined us privately, with dignity. They provided feminine hygiene products as standard issue, not luxury items. When women became ill, they received the same medications as American personnel. This medical equality seemed impossible according to what we had been told. Communication between American and Italian women occurred despite language barriers. Military records show that by October 1943, The War Department had assigned 37 female interpreters to major camps holding Italian women. These interpreters, often Italian-American WAC personnel or civilian employees, facilitated increasingly complex interactions between captors and captives. Cultural exchanges developed through proximity. Italian prisoners observed American women reading in off-duty hours, writing letters, playing sports, attending religious services, and maintaining professional relationships with male colleagues. The American women displayed independence and authority, previously unimaginable to many Italian women raised under fascist gender doctrines. The contrast between prisoner expectations and reality created profound cognitive dissonance. Reports from camp intelligence officers document conversations among Italian women expressing shock at American gender equality in military contexts. Army surveys conducted among Italian female prisoners in December 1943 revealed that 84% acknowledged their pre-capture expectations had been completely contradicted by actual treatment in American custody. The most fundamental transformation occurred through observation. American women in uniform, sleeping in adjacent barracks, demonstrating daily that female military service neither compromised feminine dignity nor subjected women to exploitation. December 1943. Camp Shanks, New York. The snow fell softly outside the recreation hall, where 87 Italian women prisoners gathered for English language classes taught by WAC Corporal Diane Martinelli. Adelina Rossi, who had once trembled in fear during her first night of captivity, now sat in the front row, notebook open, actively engaging with the instructor. 4 months into her imprisonment, medical records documented that she had gained 11 pounds, her anemia had resolved, and she had requested additional reading materials in English. This transformation from terror to tentative engagement repeated across detention facilities. Military intelligence reports, compiled by Women's Army Corps officers, tracked this psychological evolution through interviews, observation, and intercepted communications. Initial resistance manifested as silence, huddling together for protection, and refusal to engage with American personnel. By the third week, most women began accepting that their treatment contradicted their expectations. By the third month, many actively participated in available programs and initiated conversations with American guards. "We remained suspicious for weeks," Maria Conti wrote, in a letter home that passed through military censors. "We expected the Americans would eventually reveal their true intentions. Instead, they offered us classes, church services, and library books. Their women guards live in buildings just like ours. They have been correct and professional at all times. Nothing in fascist education prepared us for this reality." International Red Cross observer Frederica Noel, authorized to visit female prisoner facilities, documented the conditions in her November 1943 report. Female prisoners receive accommodations meeting or exceeding convention requirements. They occupy heated buildings with adequate sanitation, receive medical care from female practitioners when requested, consume nutritionally complete diets, and have access to educational and religious services. Most notably, they observe female American military personnel living under nearly identical conditions in adjacent facilities. Religious accommodation particularly affected Italian women, overwhelmingly Catholic. Camp records show that 92% of Italian female prisoners attended Catholic services when available. The War Department assigned 31 Catholic chaplains specifically to facilities housing Italian prisoners, including 7 Italian-speaking priests. At Camp Croft, the same chapel hosted services for both prisoners and American personnel, though at different hours. Educational opportunities expanded as detention continued. Military records document 17 different course offerings at major detention facilities by early 1944. English language, basic and advanced, typing, nursing fundamentals, bookkeeping, mathematics, geography, American history, and various vocational subjects. WAC personnel often served as instructors, creating another venue for interaction between American and Italian women. Voluntary work programs began in January 1944. Initially, only 28% of eligible Italian women participated, but by March, participation reached 71%. Workers received payment of 80 cents daily for administrative, hospital, or mess hall duties. This income allowed prisoners to purchase items from camp canteens, toiletries, snacks, writing materials, and small luxuries previously unimaginable. Most significantly, work brought Italian women into sustained contact with American personnel in professional contexts. Statistical evidence of physical improvement proved undeniable. Camp medical records from March 1944 documented that Italian female prisoners had gained an average of 9.7 pounds since capture. Conditions including anemia, vitamin deficiencies, and dental problems showed measurable improvement. Only 11% required ongoing medical treatment compared to 37% upon arrival. These health improvements occurred while civilians in Italy faced increasing shortages, with daily caloric intake falling to approximately 850 calories in northern cities by winter 1943-44. The fundamental re-evaluation of gender roles developed gradually through observation. Italian women witnessed American female officers receiving salutes from male subordinates, WAC personnel conducting training exercises, women driving military vehicles and operating communications equipment. These visible demonstrations of equality contradicted fascist gender ideology that defined women primarily through domestic roles and subservience to male authority. "We watch American women soldiers going about their duties with confidence," wrote prisoner Lucia Bianchi in a diary later preserved in military archives. "They sleep in the building next to ours, eat the same food we do, and receive the same respect from men as male officers." This is the most powerful contradiction to everything Mussolini taught us about women's proper place. We were told American women were either oppressed or immoral. Instead, they demonstrate a kind of freedom we never imagined possible. September 1945. Naples Harbour, Italy. Adelina Rossi stepped off the transport ship USS General Muir, carrying a small suitcase containing American books, a typed certificate from her English language course, and a journal documenting her 2 years as a prisoner of war. Around her, 217 other Italian women disembarked, returning to a homeland fundamentally changed by defeat and occupation. Their own transformation was equally profound. They returned not as victims, but as witnesses to an alternative model of gender relations they had once believed impossible. The repatriation process followed careful protocols established by the War Department. Each returning prisoner received transportation to their home region, a 30-day supply of rations, medical clearance documentation, and payment for any unclaimed work compensation. The women departed in groups organized by destination regions. Northern regions, 83 women. Central Italy, 76. Southern regions, 59. Military records documented that 1,742 Italian women prisoners returned to Italy between May and November 1945, with 69 choosing to remain in the United States through marriage or employment opportunities. The Italy these women returned to hardly resembled the nation they had left. Cities lay damaged by bombing and combat. Food rationing limited civilians to approximately 1,000 calories daily. The fascist regime had collapsed, replaced by a provisional government under partial Allied control. Perhaps most significantly, Italian women had moved into previously male-dominated roles during the conflict, working in factories, offices, and civil service positions previously closed to them. Comprehensive data compiled by military historians provides statistical evidence of the female Italian prisoner experience. Average length of captivity, 21.7 months. Average weight gain during detention, 13.2 pounds. Participation in educational programs, 88%. Participation in work programs, 76% by mid-1944. Religious service attendance, 91%. Most tellingly, 97% reported treatment that met or exceeded Geneva Convention requirements in post-release interviews conducted by the International Red Cross. Dr. Margaret Henderson, who studied Italian female prisoners as part of Harvard University's War Psychology Research Project, concluded in her 1948 analysis, the profound contradiction between fascist propaganda and actual American treatment created cognitive conditions that allowed for complete re-evaluation of previously accepted beliefs. Female prisoners who expected exploitation instead experienced protection. This discrepancy between expectation and reality facilitated broader questioning of fascist ideology. Personal testimonies collected in the decades following repatriation consistently identify the profound impact of observing American military women. Maria Vittoria Maloney, interviewed in 1963, recalled, "The American women slept in buildings identical to ours, ate the same food, received the same medical care. They carried sidearms, drove jeeps, gave orders to men who responded with respect." This visible evidence contradicted everything fascist education had taught us about women's capabilities and proper roles. Many former prisoners brought American influences back to post-war Italy. Education records show that 312 former prisoners used their camp-acquired English language skills to become translators or English teachers. Another 127 applied typing and administrative skills learned in camp programs to secure positions with Allied occupation authorities or American businesses establishing Italian operations. Most significantly, 89 former prisoners eventually joined Italian women's rights organizations that advocated for expanded legal and economic opportunities. The cultural exchange that began in prison camps continued through evolving diplomatic relations. When Italy established its military nursing corps in 1949, the organizational structure explicitly cited American WAC protocols as models. The first director, Colonel Renata Fabrizi, consulted with former prisoners who had observed American military medical services firsthand. July 1943, San Pietro, Sicily. The young Italian woman had clutched her blanket in terror, certain that American soldiers would violate her before morning. Instead, she discovered American women in uniform who slept outside her door as protectors rather than enablers. This fundamental contradiction between expectation and reality initiated a transformation that extended beyond individuals to influence two nations. The women who had expected to become comfort girls for American troops instead became witnesses to democratic values enacted through daily routines. They had feared violation but experienced protection. They had anticipated exploitation but received education. They had expected to serve enemy men but instead observed American women serving their country as equals. They had believed fascist propaganda about American immorality, but discovered American ethics demonstrated through professional respect. The Italian comfort girl prisoners who were stunned when American female soldiers slept beside them returned home carrying more than physical possessions. They carried first-hand evidence that contradicted fascist gender doctrines. Through the simple act of providing female guards who slept in adjacent quarters, the American military had inadvertently delivered its most effective challenge to fascist ideology, living proof that women could serve with dignity, authority, and respect.